Hello everyone and welcome to our workshop, Rethinking Exams for Virtual Instruction. Translating your face-to-face assessments for an online course can be challenging, particularly for exams. You can replace your exam with another assessment, modify the exam for open book delivery, or take some precautions from promoting academic integrity. So in this workshop, we'll share some tools and strategies for rethinking exams for virtual instruction. I'll be your presenter today. My name is Amanda Smothers, and I'm the Teaching and Learning Coordinator in the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning, formerly known as the Faculty Development and Instructional Design Center here at NIU. I've been teaching college English for 12 years, and I've taught face-to-face, hybrid, and online courses. I'm also currently teaching a face-to-face course that has moved to remote delivery, so I do understand firsthand what you've all been going through in this difficult transition. So with online assessment, assessment should be authentic. A few questions regarding that. What do you want students to be able to do by the end of your course? What skills should they have or knowledge should they have attained? Try to design an assessment that measures that skill or that knowledge. Assessment should also be meaningful. How can your assessment be a learning experience in itself? How could the process of completing the assessment give students a deeper understanding of the material and concepts? And then finally, assessments should be practical. What kind of assessment could you efficiently create? How many students do you have? How many would you have to grade? Can rubrics assist and guide in your assessment? So first we'll be doing a very brief overview of tests on Blackboard for both original course view and ultra course view. We won't be going over how to create tests in Blackboard in depth because I really want to discuss alternative methods of assessment other than tests or different ways to implement tests as well. So if you're interested in creating tests on Blackboard and need a little bit more information, please do consider watching our workshop recording for collecting assignments and delivering tests with Blackboard tools, which is linked on our Keep Teaching Workshops page. Also, just a note about recordings and Collaborate. Be patient with new recordings, both recordings for our workshops and the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning, and also in your own Collaborate sessions. Blackboard Collaborate's recordings aren't instantaneous. It usually takes at least as long as the recording length for the recording to process. So in other words, for an hour-long recording, it would take an hour to process. Recordings also don't begin to process until every single user has exited the collaboration. And then in addition, recordings may take longer than usual to process because of the dramatic increase in use due to the increases in remote delivery across the country. So I'll just begin with a very quick overview of where to find the test tool and which options for test questions are available. In original course view, you can find the test in two different places. You can create a test and add a link to the test from the content area by clicking on assessments from within the content area. So in this example, the content area is called tests, and then you choose test from the drop-down menu. You can also create a test from the test tool, and to navigate to the test tool, you would scroll down to the course management section of your left-hand navigation menu, click on course tools, and you'll see a list of options including tests, surveys, and pools. When you click on that tool from the menu, you'll arrive at this page. The top option is tests. You would click on the link to create a new test. Whichever method you use to create a test, you'll have numerous options for types of test questions. These include calculated formulas, calculated numeric questions, either-or questions, essay questions, file responses, fill in multiple blanks or fill in a single blank, and so on. Whichever question you want to create, you just click on that option and you'll be taken to a page where you can create that question type and then save it to your test. Add as many questions as you want and assign however many points per question as you want, and when you're finished, you'll click the OK button at the bottom of the page. There may be some of you who use Ultra course view, so I'll also go over where to add tests in Ultra. First of all, there's a difference between Ultra base navigation, which we all use at NIU. That's what you see when you first log into Blackboard, and Ultra course view, which is the design of an individual course, and that's what you'll see when you click on the course that you're teaching on Blackboard. Faculty and staff often get confused about which course view they're using because the name for the base navigation and course view both include the word Ultra. So if you see a screen like the one above when you click on your course, you are in Ultra Course View. Now we'll go over briefly how to find the test creation tool in an Ultra View course. There's one way to create a test in Ultra View, which is from the course content area. From the course content section, you'll hover over the line where you want to add the test, click on the purple plus sign that pops up, and then click Create. Then you'll scroll down the menu that pops up on the right side of your screen and choose the option Test under the Assessment heading. Once you click Test, you'll be taken to this page. You'll need to add a name for your test, choose settings, and add test questions. You'll also need to change the visibility so that students can access the test once you've completed it. There are fewer question types for UltraView courses at this time. So in other words, some of the options that you have in an original view course are not yet available for UltraView tests. Many of the basic question types are available, however, including calculated formula questions, fill in the blank, matching, multiple choice, true, false, and essay questions. So now that we've had a very brief overview of where to find the test tool in your Blackboard course, let's discuss some assessment alternatives to tests or alternative ways of delivering tests. Before you choose an assessment, whether it's a test or another type of summative assessment, you should ask yourself a few questions. First, what do you want students to demonstrate in the assessment that you're looking to create? Do you want them to demonstrate lower order skills like recalling facts or identifying or explaining concepts? Do you want them to show that they can use information in a new situation by interpreting or applying a concept? Do you want them to demonstrate that they can draw connections between ideas by analyzing or comparing? Do you want them to be able to justify a stance through a critique, argument, or evaluation? Or do you want them to produce new or original work in a design or original composition? The first important step in creating an assessment is determining what you are trying to assess. And the second step is to determine how you can measure student learning. So in other words, what type of assessment makes the most sense based on what you want your students to be able to demonstrate? If you want students to justify a stance through a critique, a multiple choice exam is probably not the best way to measure student learning. A multiple choice exam is a way to have students show that they can recall facts, whereas an essay may be a good way to have students demonstrate that they can critique an idea and support their critique with evidence and logic. If you do decide that a Blackboard exam is the way that you want to assess students, then you'll want to take into consideration that students will have access to resources as they take their test online. Since it's difficult to restrict students from using resources like textbook or the internet while they're taking an exam, think of an online exam as an open book or take-home exam. Since you're administering your exams online, you'll want to create exam questions that exercise higher order thinking skills. So for example, ask students to apply a technique to a new situation or to analyze a data set. You can also adjust to the online exam open book model by giving students more complex scenarios or questions to solve than you would normally require in a face-to-face closed book setting. Finally, you may want to communicate with students what materials are allowed or prohibited as they take exams, but keep in mind that you'll have to rely on the honor system as it would be difficult to enforce these restrictions. Another option would be the cooperative test or quiz, which basically means that students collaborate on the assessment. There are two ways to conduct a cooperative or a group quiz. First, students could collaborate while taking the quiz or test. So students would need to negotiate amongst themselves which answer is correct and explain to each other why. If one student doesn't know the answer, they would learn from discussion with their peers. The group would then need to come to a consensus on each answer, which would require them to discuss the course material. A second method to cooperative quizzing or testing is having students take the quiz or test alone first and then submit it for a grade. And then they would cooperate with their groups to take the quiz a second time. Again, they would discuss the course material and arrive at consensus for each answer. And then their grade would weigh both the individual and the group assessments, and you could control which score holds more weight or whether you want them to be weighted equally. The method of collaborative testing would be effective not only for assessing students' knowledge, but also promoting discussion, debate, and cooperation among students. And it also eliminates the concern about students collaborating to cheat because they're being permitted and required to collaborate. One alternative assessment to a test is the essay assignment. And in an essay, students can move beyond recalling facts to analyze an important concept, critique a viewpoint, argue a position, respond to a source, or solve a problem. Also, with an essay, students can enter into the disciplinary discourse, familiarize themselves with the writing conventions of your field, and demonstrate their understanding of course concepts. Essays may take time to grade, so that's a consideration, but you can create a grading rubric that would help identify the criteria on which students will be graded and what each performance level would look like. There are plenty of resources online for rubrics that have already been created in many fields of study and for many different types of assessments, so you don't have to start from scratch. So rather, you could find a rubric that would give you a good starting point, edit it to serve your objectives and your specific assessment, and then align it with your essay assignment. You could also have students complete a project instead of taking a test. For example, in an NGO course, you could assign an urban sustainability video assignment in which students have to create a compelling visual narrative that highlights a topical or neglected issue relating to the topic. Or in a history course, you could have students create a group project like a wiki or a project website that covers an important event or course concept. So depending on your course objectives, projects could help you engage students in meaningful assessment through which they can make connections between ideas, research issues, problems, or solutions, or apply what they've learned in the creation of their project. Students could also demonstrate their understanding of course concepts by creating a digital poster or an infographic that displays their knowledge visually. Through their poster or infographic, students can show that they understand and can identify essential information, and they can prove that they can draw connections between ideas. So similar to the project assessment, the digital poster or infographic could be used for a meaningful assessment. So for example, an accounting course could use a digital poster or infographic assignment to display students' knowledge of, for example, how accounting systems can either hinder or facilitate a company's economic growth. And there are programs online free to help students with creating these digital posters or infographics. I used Canva with my own infographics. I created an infographic syllabus for my students. So that was a very useful tool, but there are a lot of other ones out there too. Instead of or in addition to testing students just at the end of a unit, you could also weave assessment into their course readings by having students regularly annotate or summarize their textbook or other course readings. So that'll allow you to see whether students are understanding what they read as they read it. Online tools like Hypothesis, which has a Chrome plugin, could help you assign annotation of online sources or e-texts, or you could have students just summarize their physical texts or even your lectures. You could help students make connections between course concepts by requiring them to include those connections in their annotations or summaries. So for example, you could encourage them to think about previous readings and how they connect to the current reading. Another assessment idea, a little bit related, but a little bit more of a formal annotation would be the annotated bibliography. So if you have students read texts written for the discipline, like scholarly journal articles, you could have them annotate the text that you've curated for them, or you could have them conduct their own research using our online library databases to create an annotated bibliography with the resources that they find. So through this type of assessment, students will learn how to cite in your field's preferred citation method, and they'd write annotations for each source that follow your stipulations, which is how you can personalize the assignment to achieve your learning objectives. Do you want students to summarize? Do you want them to analyze, draw connections, identify strengths and weaknesses and arguments or evidence? So you want to stipulate what you want your students to do in their annotations other than just provide a summary of the text. And that is, if you want them to do more with it than summarize, be aware that students' default tends to be summarizing. I've assigned a lot of annotated bibliographies, and so that tends to be their fallback is the summary instead of the analysis. So if you want them to analyze, make sure that you stipulate that. And examples are always helpful too. Modeling. As with any assessment that requires writing, you should identify the content, length, and formatting requirements and provide students with a rubric that outlines how they'll be assessed. Having students deliver presentations online is also an effective assessment strategy. You can have students deliver presentations virtually, whether that was the original plan for your face-to-face course or if you're looking for an assessment to replace an exam. Students could deliver presentations live or synchronously, or they could record a presentation to share with you and their classmates asynchronously. Be cognizant, though, of students' technological resources and capabilities. Do your students have the ability to record via webcam? Do they have the ability to record audio? What are the options and alternatives if students don't have the technological capability to record themselves? Do they have a phone from which they could record audio in Collaborate or VoiceThread? Explore options, give your students different ways to complete the assignment based on their circumstances. There are a few tools that you already have access to that you could consider for students to deliver presentations. In Blackboard Collaborate, students can meet together virtually and deliver their presentations synchronously or asynchronously if they record. They could create an individual or group presentation to record and share with the rest of the class, or they could deliver their presentation in real time to the entire class in a synchronous session. For example, if you're meeting regularly with your class synchronously, students can present using their webcam and audio, and they can use the share feature to present using a PowerPoint or screen sharing. There's also an option to phone into the Collaborate session if students do not have a microphone on their computer. With VoiceThread, students can upload their PowerPoint slides to VoiceThread and record audio over them. Then they would share the VoiceThread with you and their classmates asynchronously. There's no synchronous option for VoiceThread. So to use this option, VoiceThread for assessment, you would use VoiceThread's graded option when you're setting it up. Check the box to enable evaluation, and then use the assignment builder to require that students create their own voice. Using Kaltura Capture, students can record any material on their screen, like a PowerPoint presentation, Word document, or a software program, and they can narrate with audio as they deliver their presentation. Kaltura is also an asynchronous option, and Kaltura Capture does require students to download the program so that they can record. Alternatively, students could upload videos that they record outside of Kaltura Capture to Kaltura Blackboard. So if students need to record using their smartphone, they could upload the video to their Kaltura library. And that option means that they wouldn't have to download it, but it also means that they would have to have recording and storing capability outside of Kaltura, either through a smartphone or on their computer. There are also many other options for facilitating student presentations, including Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, Microsoft PowerPoint, all of which allow recording. Whichever method you use, make sure that you learn how to use it yourself so that you can teach your students how to use it. Also, make sure that there are ways to make the material accessible to the class through recording. For instance, Kaltura and VoiceThread both auto-caption recordings, though you and your students should check it for accuracy. If you need any more information on any of these options, you can contact our team and we will help you learn more. If you use recording outside of Collaborate, VoiceThread, or Kaltura, make sure that you contact us to discuss your options and how you can collect these assignments from your students. So for example, email may reject files that are too large, and you don't want to use up all of your data allotment for your course by having students upload large files. Another assessment option is the performance or demonstration, a little bit similar to the presentation option. With this option, students would create videos, photographs, or presentations that demonstrate their disciplinary knowledge and skills. So it requires creativity to alter performance-based assessments for virtual instruction. Typical disciplines that use performance-based assessment include things like dance and theater and music, along with other subjects that assess maybe athletics ability or use laboratory procedures, or use medical techniques. You may teach a performance-based class like music, speech, theater, or kinesiology, or you may teach a hands-on class that includes a lab component in which students demonstrate what they've learned, or you may teach another type of class like a history, literature, or foreign language, and you want to explore performance or demonstration-based assessment for that. So as you explore performance-based assessment, I do have a few strategies and options for you to consider. One option is to ask students to analyze a technique or performance being demonstrated by someone else, using an image or a video, using an objective assessment or an open-ended assessment. So keep in mind that this might not be accessible for someone with a visual disability, for example. So always be mindful of accessibility issues as you create course materials and your assessments. Alternatively, you could meet with students as a group or individually using web conferencing tools like Blackboard Collaborate or Microsoft Teams, and use the webcam and audio to watch students perform the skills synchronously. So for example, students could perform a scene or a monologue for an acting class online, or perform a musical piece as an ensemble. You can see all of the creative ways that professionals and other schools are doing this virtually on social media. There have been a lot of viral videos that have gone out. Or students could give their speech or host a mock news segment, either asynchronously using Kaltura or synchronously with collaborator teams. You could also have students record themselves or take photographs using a smartphone while performing the skill and submit the video or image in a Blackboard assignment, or to a Blackboard discussion board, or to a VoiceThread assignment. If specialized equipment is required that would only be available at NIU's campus, you'll want to work with your department chair and academic leadership to determine whether there's a way to provide students with the necessary equipment. If not, are there any alternative methods of assessment that you could explore? So for example, is there a virtual or a software program that could replace the lab experience for a gen ed biology course? And how would you pay for the program without passing that cost on to students? And we'll discuss more about restrictions on fees for students a little bit later in the workshop. Case studies are another assessment alternative to tests. With a case study, you'd present students with a deep, complex case to analyze and respond to in a narrative format. Students would identify problems, describe alternatives, and recommend solutions. Through tackling complex case studies, students develop critical reasoning skills, they apply their didactic knowledge to solve complex problems, and they detail their decision-making steps as they untangle scenarios without a single solution. Case studies can be useful for a range of disciplines such as nursing and NGO studies, business management, marketing, biology, history, and even theater design and technology. There are a plethora of ready-made case studies that can be found online that you could use with your students, or you could take the time to create your own after reviewing some ready-made case studies to see how they should be set up and what level of complexity is required. So maybe you will decide that none of these alternative assessment options will do, and you want to stick with traditional testing. That's definitely okay. If you do decide to use online tests as your summative assessments, you're probably going to be worried about academic integrity. There are a few steps that you can take to promote academic integrity when implementing a test online in Blackboard. First, you could ask students to type up or agree to an honor statement that asserts that they did not use prohibited sources and that the work is their own. That's more of an honor system approach. If you want a strategy to prevent unauthorized collaboration when setting up your test, you could randomize your question order. You can also randomize answers for an individual test assignment if it's multiple choice or multiple select questions. You could also add a timer to the test. That would mean that once a student has started the test, they have a certain reasonable amount of time to finish it. They wouldn't be able to stop the timer by closing the test. It would continue to run, and the time would run out and lock them out of the test if they don't go back in and finish before that time is up. You may want to enable auto submit if you choose the time to test option so that a student's test is automatically submitted when the time runs out. That would prevent students from receiving no credit for an incomplete test, so at least they would get some credit if they answered some of the questions. You might also be thinking about whether to force completion of the test, which means that students would have to complete the test in one sitting. So in other words, they wouldn't be able to exit and re-enter the test. The drawback to this option is that it doesn't take into consideration students' individual circumstances that might prevent them from completing it in one sitting. So for instance, if a student loses internet connection, they won't be able to get back into the test when the internet is reconnected. Or if a student has an emergency situation and has to leave the test, she or he won't be able to get back in if forced completion is on. Another way to address academic integrity is to limit the number of possible attempts for a test. You can choose any number of attempts a student can make on a test, from 1 up to unlimited. If you want students to have one chance to complete the test, indicate that. That should be the default option, but always double check. If you want students to be able to retake the test for a better grade, then you can indicate the number of times that they can do so. Also, be strategic about when students are able to view the correct answers for your test. You could set up your test so that the correct answers will only display once all students in the course have finished the test. That'll help prevent students from giving out test answers to classmates. But keep in mind that that will not help if students are given multiple chances to take the test, as it would release the correct answers after everyone's taken the test at least once. And then finally, you could use large question pools and choose the option to have Blackboard assign a random set of questions for each student. So that means that not every student is going to have the same questions on their test, which would also prevent students from sharing test questions with their classmates. If you choose any of these test options, make sure that you communicate it clearly to your students, along with any of the other settings that I've mentioned that you choose to employ, so that they're aware of what the parameters are for your test. One option that you may be considering or have dabbled with is test proctoring. We have access to Respondent's Lockdown Browser and Blackboard, which is one option that I will discuss in a bit. However, we're not currently recommending proctoring for online tests. Remote proctoring can provide a more secure testing environment in certain circumstances, but there are some significant considerations that you need to think about before adopting online proctoring, and I'll go over that right now. First, what is proctoring? A proctored exam is a supervised exam. When an online exam is proctored, usually a program is used to supervise students during the exam. Exams can be proctored synchronously, which is when a live proctor supervises the exam in real time, like in a testing center, but they can also be proctored asynchronously. For example, a video of the student taking the exam is recorded and reviewed by the instructor or a proxy. Online proctoring services can also be used to verify the identity of students prior to them taking the test and to promote academic integrity while students complete an online exam. So proctoring might seem like a good idea, but there are a few issues that you should consider before you adopt online proctoring. First of all, who's going to pay for it? Pricing varies. It can cost between $3 and $60 per hour. There are some vendors who are offering discounted or free services, but keep in mind that these services are probably experiencing a higher load, so that might affect their service. Also, and this is very important, the Higher Learning Commission prohibits the university from requiring students to pay fees for course delivery that are not specified when students register for the course. So what that means is that we cannot require students to pay for online proctoring if that fee was not announced at the time that they registered for the course. Another consideration is whether students have the necessary technology. Proctoring requires a laptop or desktop computer and generally cannot be used on a smartphone, tablet, or Chromebook, and it also requires reliable internet access. Additionally, proctoring requires a webcam for the software to monitor the student. And remember, if students don't have the required technology, we can't require them to purchase it, as that could be considered a course delivery fee that wasn't communicated during registration. Another consideration is whether the invasion of privacy involved in proctoring is absolutely necessary. Since online proctoring requires a student to be recorded so you can review the recording, the environment in which they're taking the test may not be secluded, so it may involve recording their pets, their children, family members, or other aspects of their personal environment. That's an invasion of their privacy at a time when they may be feeling vulnerable or anxious, not only because they're taking an exam in a new format, but also because of the disruption to their lives and studies that the pandemic and the consequent move to remote learning have created. So while proctoring services are secure, you may want to think about whether they're necessary at this time. Along these same lines, consider whether students will be able to create a secure, quiet environment that's free of interruption. Since proctoring often relies on automated analysis of recorded audio and video, there may be issues with accuracy if there are other people talking or moving around. Students would also need to avoid looking away from the screen during the exam, which would be interpreted by the proctoring program as looking at prohibited materials. So do your students have the ability to create the required space in their current living situation? Do your students have younger siblings or pets that may cause distractions? Do your students have to look after children or older relatives? Do your students live with a lot of other people who may cause disruptions or distractions during the test? Would your students be able to complete the exam without leaving the computer? Keep in mind that if a student had to step away from the proctored exam briefly to care for a child or help an elderly or a disabled family member, that would be flagged as an integrity violation. In addition, consider whether students have the necessary internet access for online proctoring. Most of these tools require a strong and reliable internet signal. If a student loses internet connection during the proctored exam, the program will terminate the test and require students to contact you for an accommodation to reschedule the exam. So consider whether you'll want to deal with this issue and how you'll handle it when it arises, and technical issues will inevitably arise, as we all know. That leads to the next consideration. Can you yourself help students troubleshoot their proctoring issues? Many of these services do have support, but since the entire country, the world even, is moving online, it might be in high demand and students may not be able to get timely help. If students can't get help from the proctoring services support team, you may need to assist students with technology or other testing. Also, because the issues are specific to the external proctoring system, neither DoIT nor our center nor you may be able to address technical issues your students are having with their proctored exam. Now, NIU does have a proctoring solution called Respondus Lockdown Browser, which is a web browser like Chrome or Firefox. Respondus Lockdown Browser strictly limits students' ability to do anything on their computer but take their exam. If you're using original course use, students need to download the browser and log into your course directly from the lockdown browser. They won't be able to access the test from within another browser. If they try, it will prompt them for a password. That password is automatically generated to keep students from accessing the test in a normal browser. So do not give them the auto-generated password. You cannot change this password and it will bypass Respondus. If you're using Ultra Course View, students can access the Respondus Lockdown browser directly from the course. They would just click on the link and it would automatically open the test in Respondus Lockdown browser. Respondus adds an automated proctoring service, and our university does have an existing relationship with the vendor, so we do have free use of Respondus. However, while it is free and functional, it is susceptible to technical, software, and internet connectivity issues, as we've already discussed, and all of the considerations that I've mentioned still apply to Respondus. So if you've taken all of the issues that I've addressed here into consideration and you still believe that proctoring is your best answer, consider using Respondus, as it's free to students. It's integrated into Blackboard already. And if you are considering Respondus, there are daily online training sessions available through Respondus, and we do strongly encourage you to complete the training before you implement Respondus so that you know what it is and how it works before you start using it. So when you have to adjust your schedule or approach mid-semester, you may be concerned about how students will respond to the changes and whether they'll be able to complete the assessment. One strategy is to give students some control of their assessments by offering multiple ways that they could demonstrate their learning and allowing them to choose which method will work for them and their unique circumstances. For example, you could offer students the choice of taking an exam or completing another type of assignment or project in lieu of the exam. That'll allow students to choose an assignment or project that can be chunked and fit flexibly into their daily or weekly schedule rather than an exam that they have to sit down for an hour or more at once to take. You could also provide students with the same basic task, but allow them to choose the medium that they use. So for example, you could let them choose between writing a report or creating a presentation or making a video on the same topic or course concept. When it's possible to do so, it is a good idea to provide some alternatives that allow students to be successful, even if they have limited technology or internet access. Providing these alternatives also takes some of the burden off of students who may be hesitant or embarrassed to ask for other options due to their unique circumstances and technological or environmental limitations. So finally, I just want to point out our Keep Teaching website to you, which I'm sure many of you are already familiar with or at least aware of. This is where you can access all the resources that we've compiled to help you deliver your courses remotely. There are also links to workshop recordings and contact information for our center for NIU faculty and staff. If you are an NIU employee, you can schedule a one-on-one consultation with a member of our Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning team. To schedule a consultation, you should fill out the online form and choose the service that you want and the date and time you'd like to reserve. Add your contact information in the space provided. Give us a brief description of your question or issue so that we have an idea of what you want us to help you with. One-on-one consultations will be delivered remotely. They can be delivered either by phone or online via Blackboard Collaborate. If Collaborate's having issues, then we can also move those consultations to Microsoft Teams. You could also choose to schedule a conversation with a remote teaching fellow. Remote teaching fellows are experienced NIU faculty members or instructors, and they volunteered their time to discuss your questions regarding remote teaching. If you have questions about specific technology, you'll want to select an online or phone consultation with our staff. Again, consultations are limited to NIU staff, faculty, and graduate teaching assistants. This is just a list of some references and resources that you might find useful as you explore alternatives to traditional tests for your remote course facilitation. I will include this list of resources to you in a follow-up email that I'll send to everyone who registered for this workshop, so you have easy access to them as you explore your assessment options for the rest of this semester, and as well as while you're thinking about online courses this summer. Thank you all for joining us again today to explore